Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Dion Gordon Podcast. I am your host, the connoisseur of common sense, the purveyor of authenticity, the man who calls it right down the middle, Dion Tyree Gordon. Enough of the bullshit. Let's get to work. Lamar Jackson, 2019 NFL League MVP Lamar Jackson, finds himself in a bit of a contract conundrum. He's asking for $250 million over a 5-year span. Deshaun Watson got a $230 million guaranteed contract with division rival Cleveland. Now, when that deal happened with Watson and Cleveland, a lot of owners in the NFL were pissed off about that behind closed doors because those owners knew that if they were trying to sign a free agent quarterback of a certain status and stature and renown, it was going to cost them at least $230 million. Or if you already have a franchise quarterback on your roster, as the Baltimore Ravens do, then that quarterback is going to ask for a similar contract like Lamar Jackson is. So what's going on right now is all 32 owners, 31 out of 32 owners are trying to reset the market, or better yet, more specifically, keep these motherfuckers in line. And unfortunately for Lamar Jackson, he is now becoming victim of that. Instead of getting that 5-year, $250 million guaranteed contract, what Lamar Jackson got this week was a non-exclusive franchise tag that would pay him $32.4 million on a non-exclusive tag, meaning that he can negotiate with other teams. Baltimore has the right to match any offer and would receive 2 first-round picks if it chooses not to match. Jackson and Baltimore have reached this point as the two sides continue to be too far apart as far as a long-term deal is concerned. Now, obviously, this has been a major talking point this week. A lot of discussion about Lamar Jackson, his contract, the details of it, other quarterbacks, the contracts they got from other teams, and the details of those contracts. A lot of opinions being expressed this week about this entire situation. Most of those opinions misguided, misinformed, misinformation, misconception, a lot of misnomers, a lot of people missing the points. First and foremost, Lamar Jackson's contract situation. Baltimore had already made an offer to him before last season started, a 5-year deal, $250 million, $133 million guaranteed. Lamar turned it down because, as previously stated, Lamar's asking for a 5-year deal with $250 million guaranteed. So there's an impasse here. There's a difference of, give or take $117 million or so. Pardon me if my math is incorrect. He wants what he wants. And personally, I have no problem with people asking for what they want. You should always demand more. It would be hypocritical of me to sit here and say that Lamar Jackson should not be asking for that contract, given the fact that I personally have always implored people to ask for more money at whatever job you work for. Myself personally has always asked for the most amount of money I could possibly get. I'm not settling for less. I'm not working for crumbs. I know who I am. I know what my value is. I know what I bring to the table. And most importantly, more specifically, I know what I'm going to work for and I know what I'm not going to work for. So I got no issue with Lamar Jackson or any other professional athlete making demands on their contract and asking for a certain amount of money. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't offend me in the least. However, once we dig deeper and look at the football aspects of it and break down the entire situation, is he going to get that $250 million guaranteed? Probably not. Should he get it based off what he's done over the years, based off the amount of games he's missed? He's only played one football game in the month of December the past 2 seasons. His numbers have declined since that MVP season in 2019. He only has one playoff win under his belt. Based off all of those things and many other things, certain deficiencies on the field, not being able to always handle a cover zero blitz, not always being the most accurate passer out there, not really adding on to his game from a pocket passing standpoint. Should he get that $250 million? I don't think so. Me personally, I think there's only 2 quarterbacks in the NFL right now that are worthy of a contract like that. Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, just won his 2nd Super Bowl, and Joe Burrow. That's it. That's the list to me. Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes are the only two quarterbacks in the NFL that I personally would give a contract of that magnitude to. Josh Allen in Buffalo, I'm not giving him $250 million. He's turned the ball over a lot the past 2 seasons, and similar to Lamar, he plays a dangerous style of football. He's always running around outside the pocket. You hate to say it, but it's only a matter of time until injuries start being an issue for him. They kind of already are. He got banged up this season. He had a bad elbow. But with that reckless, I won't say reckless, but with that dangerous style of football, when you're exposing yourself to so much punishment and so many different hits, once you leave the pocket, you now become a ball carrier. The rules are not going to protect you once you're outside the pocket. And when you are a quarterback who's also a de facto running back for your football team, your career probably isn't going to be that long. You're not going to last that long in the NFL. Ask Andrew Luck. Look at Cam Newton. All these quarterbacks that are dual threat, hybrid quarterbacks that run around and make a lot of plays outside the pocket, they don't last that long. Tom Brady played until he was 45 years old. You know why? He was in the pocket. He was always almost exclusively in the pocket. You didn't see Brady trying to run around outside the pocket and take on defenders and lower his shoulder and run over linebackers. No, that's not conducive to having a long career. Drew Brees played until he was about 40 years old. Same thing, pocket quarterback. You don't see too many highlights of Drew Brees outside the pocket trying to take on defenders and trying to make a big play, trying to run for a first down or a touchdown, like a 60, 70-yard gain or whatever. No, you don't see too much of that. Pocket quarterbacks. That's who I'm going to give that much money to. Guys that have demonstrated that they can sit in the pocket, read a defense, go through progressions, and make an accurate, on-time throw to whatever receiver they're trying to throw to. If you demonstrate to me that you can do that with regularity and success and consistency, yes, I might entertain giving you $250 million guaranteed. Or someone like Mahomes is also kind of sort of a dual threat quarterback. He can make plays outside the pocket with his legs. He can improv. He can extend plays. He can pick up first downs. Shit like that. He can do a lot of the same things that Lamar and Josh Allen do, but he doesn't do them all the time. And Mahomes, more so than Allen and Jackson, can sit in the pocket and carve you up. He can dice you up sitting in the pocket. Look at the Super Bowl. He threw 3 touchdown passes in that game. They all came from the pocket. And he didn't turn the ball over. And he protected himself. Even when he did run outside the pocket and re-injure his ankle or whatever, he still finished the game and they won the Super Bowl for the second time in 4 years. I like Lamar Jackson. Really, I do. Trust me when I say that. I like Lamar Jackson. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL when healthy. That's the problem, though. The past 2 seasons really hasn't been healthy, as previously stated. Only one time has he played in a football game in the month of December the last 2 seasons. It's difficult from an organizational standpoint. From the Baltimore Ravens perspective, how do you justify giving that much money, guaranteed money, to a guy who in back-to-back seasons did not complete the season, did not finish? The best ability you can have, availability. And truthfully, the offer made by Baltimore, 5 years, $250 million, $133 million guaranteed, to me, that's an appropriate contract. I personally would have taken that contract. $133 million guaranteed. Yeah, obviously you want the $250 million, but realistically speaking, you're not going to get it. The Cleveland Browns are a stupid organization. They do things like that. They're also a desperate organization. They haven't had a quarterback since Bernie Kosar. The Cleveland Browns really have not had a legitimate franchise quarterback, someone they can depend on for a number of years since Bernie Kosar. And that's going back to the 80s and the 90s. Since then, it's been a quarterback graveyard for the Cleveland Browns. We're talking about the most recent example, Baker Mayfield. You're talking about the colossal failure that was Johnny Manziel. You're talking about Brandon Weeden, my man Deshaun Kaiser from Notre Dame. You're talking about Tim Couch. You're talking about Spurgeon Wynn. You're talking about Kelly Holcomb. I mean, this is a who's who of shitty quarterbacks over the years. Jason Campbell played for them for a cup of coffee. Derek Anderson in 2010. I mean, they've had nothing. The Browns are a demoralized, dilapidated, and depressed franchise. So, of course, They would be the ones to offer $230 million to Deshaun Watson. I'm not even hating. I'm not mad about it. Go ahead and get your money. It is what it is. But just because Cleveland does something like that doesn't mean that other organizations are going to follow suit. And the Baltimore Ravens have established themselves over the years as being a logical, coherent, functional organization that prides itself on making common sense decisions. And signing Lamar Jackson to a deal worth $250 in guaranteed money, $250 million in guaranteed money, that's not logical. That's not common sense. It's not a cogent decision to make. His health is definitely a concern. What is also a concern is when he's on the field and the way he played in the fourth quarter last season. Lamar Jackson was not good in the fourth quarter of football games last season. Look at what happened to the Baltimore Ravens in multiple games in 2022. They blew big leads in the second half, and in particular in the fourth quarter, and the struggles of the quarterback coincide with that. Lamar Jackson in the fourth quarter last season was 29 of 45 for 326 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. He had only 6 fourth quarter interceptions in his first 4 NFL seasons. His quarterback rating in the fourth quarter last season was a paltry 56.3, his lowest of any quarter by a wide margin. He has a quarterback rating of 97.8 in the first quarter, 114.8 in the second, 100.6 in the third. And then we fall all the way down to 56.3 in the fourth quarter. Once we dig deeper and look at his performance in certain individual games, it still paints a pretty nasty looking picture of how he performed in 2022. In week 2 against Miami, he overthrew rookie tight end Isaiah Likely on a third down with Baltimore leading by a touchdown. The Ravens had to punt. 3 plays later, the Dolphins tied the game, and they would eventually go on to win the game. In a game against the Buffalo Bills, Lamar Jackson was picked off by safety Jordan Poyer with the game tied in the fourth quarter of a Week 4 matchup. On the very next drive, and the game still tied, Jackson had Devin Duvernay wide open in the back of the end zone, but didn't see him until it was too late. When he finally threw the ball to Duvernay, the window had closed, and Jordan Poyer made the interception for a second time in that game. There was also a game against the New York Giants where Lamar Jackson self-destructed in the fourth quarter last season. This happened with regularity last season. Now, you got to break down all the factors that go into that. Was the offensive line last year, the past 2 seasons, really in Baltimore that good? No. The receivers, the players at the skill positions, were they any good? No, not really. Who are you throwing the ball to? Devin Duvernay? You got the rookie, the young man, Rashad Bateman, who showed some flashes here and there, but he also got hurt and was inconsistent for the most part. Really, the only viable weapon that Lamar has had to throw to the past couple seasons has been tight end Mark Andrews. Everyone else would more than all of Baltimore's receivers, even at their best, would more than likely be at best a 2 on different football teams, more than likely a 3. He had Marquise Hollywood Brown for a couple of years. He didn't really pan out. Baltimore, for whatever reason, they've been able to draft well at other positions. But wide receiver has been a failure for that organization for a long time, really since the inception of the Baltimore Ravens. Name a great Baltimore Ravens receiver that they drafted ever. Since they came into existence in 1996, name a great Baltimore Ravens receiver that the organization drafted. They've had good free agent receivers that they brought in, like Anquan Bolden, Steve Smith Sr., guys like that. They brought in someone like Shannon Sharp to play tight end, and he was a key, vital member of that 2000 championship team. But what receiver have the Baltimore Ravens ever drafted that turned out to be a great football player? There is none. Even in Lamar's MVP season, 2019, he threw 36 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. That's a tremendous touchdown to interception ratio, 36-6. You really can't do much better than that. That's awesome. That's ideal. That's perfect. That's wonderful. That's glorious. But even in that season, he didn't have any weapons. You're talking about Miles Boykin. I'm a Notre Dame fan. I like Miles Boykin. But in the NFL, he's been nothing. Willie Snead was on that team, another target of Lamar Jackson in 2019. Also not very good. So we're not talking about elite receivers he's ever had to play with throughout his entire career. We're not talking about a guy being surrounded by great weapons. You look at even the 2 quarterbacks I named that I would pay $250 million to in guaranteed money. Joe Burrow has Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, 3 exceptional NFL wide receivers. Patrick Mahomes came into an ideal situation in Kansas City. You already had Tyreek Hill, and then you already have Travis Kelce. So you have a great top 5 wide receiver from the gate, from the very beginning, and a future Hall of Fame tight end. You're surrounded by great players. You also have Sammy Watkins on that 2019 team. And you have a great play caller in Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, who should be a head coach in the NFL right now. Eric Bieniemy should not be an assistant head coach, offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. That's complete bullshit. Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach. Name another coordinator in the NFL ever that can say they were a part of not 1 but 2 championship teams, 2 Super Bowl winning teams in a 5-year window and didn't get an opportunity to become a head coach somewhere else. Name another coordinator that can say that. Not even getting interviews really. Or if he does get an interview, it's a quick interview. A phone call counts as an interview. How come Eric Bieniemy is not a head coach in the NFL? People try to say, well, he has Patrick Mahomes. Well, Josh McDaniels had Tom Brady. Hasn't stopped Josh McDaniels from getting not 1, not 2, but 3 different head coaching opportunities. Complete bullshit. And what has McDaniels done with those 3 opportunities? Nothing. Completely garbage. So I don't know why people always hold it against Bieniemy that he had Patrick Mahomes, but no one ever holds it against Josh McDaniels that he had Tom Brady. But I digress. But back to Lamar Jackson. He has not been surrounded by great weapons. He has not been surrounded by great offensive minds. He had Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator. So that's going against him. That's always been against him since day one. Baltimore plays a gimmicky offense, a lot of shotgun and pistol formations, a lot of 13 personnel, 1 running back, 3 tight ends, big, heavy formations. They pride themselves on running the football in Baltimore. And Lamar is just as much a part of that as anyone else, as any of their running backs. But still, the struggles have been there. And even with him individually, there have been struggles over the years throwing outside the numbers. There have been struggles handling a cover 0 blitz. That Thursday night game in 2021 against Miami, Brian Flores, who then was the head coach in the Miami Dolphins, emptied the clip as far as all-out blitz was concerned, just coming after Lamar Jackson, an all-out assault. And he struggled in that game. He was terrible. In all the subsequent games after that, he was still terrible because this is a copycat league, so teams just copy and paste. If they see something as being successful that a different team did, they're going to incorporate that into what they do. So if teams sit down and watch Miami attack Lamar Jackson with a cover 0 blitz and he can't handle it, they're going to replicate the same formula, the same exact strategy. And he was a dud against cover 0 that entire 2021 season up until he got hurt and couldn't finish the season. This is a very complicated matter. I want to see Lamar get paid. I want to see Lamar get the money that's commiserate with his skill set and ability and what he's accomplished and done in the NFL. However, I understand why Baltimore might be trepidatious to pay him that money, not only because of the durability concerns, but also because the lack of maturation as far as a pure pocket passer is concerned. Since 2019, as I said, the numbers have declined. We could talk about the absence of skill at the skill positions, but there's also some things that Lamar has done or not done that have impeded his progress. There's still some accuracy issues. There's still some timing issues. There's still not seeing the field or reading coverage in an ideal way that you would like to see from a guy who's been starting in the NFL long enough. Would I want to have Lamar Jackson on my team as a 49er fan? And there's already rumors right now about the 49ers potentially bringing in Lamar Jackson. Would I like to have Lamar Jackson on the 49ers? Yes. Yes, absolutely. If you bring in Lamar Jackson, that increases our chances of winning a Super Bowl exponentially. As much as I like Trey Lance, and as awesome as Brock Purdy was last season, if you bring in Lamar Jackson, he has more talent and ability than both of those guys. It's still raw in some areas, but he's already demonstrated that he can play at an MVP level. So if you bring in Lamar Jackson and you add him to the mix that includes George Kittle and Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk, Kyle Juszczyk with Kyle Shanahan calling plays, that could potentially be dangerous for the rest of the NFL. So me personally, would I like him on my team? Yes. Sure, why not? Would I like it if the 49ers paid him $250 million guaranteed? Not so much. But that initial offer that Baltimore made, I feel like that's an appropriate offer. $133 million guaranteed, and you haven't finished the last 2 seasons healthy? That's a good offer. That's a great offer if we're being honest and transparent about things, which is something I pride myself on. That intro at the beginning of every podcast is not just empty-ass words. It's something I feel and believe. The connoisseur of common sense, the purveyor of authenticity. These are real, authentic, legitimate feelings and emotions I'm conveying right now. Would I like to have Lamar Jackson on the 49ers? Yes. Do I think he should get that contract he's asking for? Based on what he's done the past couple of years, based on the lack of durability, not really, no. And I understand why Baltimore's taking the stance that they're taking. Now, what I didn't like, what I saw this week that came out in the immediate aftermath of the announcement that Lamar Jackson will be signed to a non-exclusive franchise tag. Immediately, about an hour after the fact, an hour after this was announced, you had multiple teams come out and publicly state, nah, we good. We don't need Lamar. We're not interested. Teams that are clearly quarterback deficient, the Indianapolis Colts, who have not had a quarterback since Andrew Luck abruptly retired, came out immediately and said, nah, we good. We're not interested. The Atlanta Falcons, the Washington Commanders, horrible football teams that don't have a quarterback, immediately said we don't have interest? What? I can understand on some levels how you might not want to pay him the money he's asking for and also have to cough up 2 first-round draft picks to bring him in. I get that. But for teams that are quarterback deficient, teams that have nothing at that position, if you're Indianapolis, you got Sam Ehlinger right now as the only quarterback on your roster. You can draft a quarterback in the upcoming draft. You got a top 10 pick. But you got Sam Ehlinger and nothing else right now. You mean to tell me if you're Indianapolis, you wouldn't want to bring in Lamar Jackson? If you're Atlanta, you got Desmond Ridder. He's all right. He showed some flashes in a couple of games he started last year, but he's not Lamar Jackson. If you're Tampa Bay, you got Kyle Trask. Tom Brady retired. You have Kyle Trask on your roster. The Washington Commanders, you got Sam Howell. I didn't understand why these teams couldn't wait. We're in such a hurry to publicly state, nah, we good. We don't want nothing to do with Lamar Jackson. These teams couldn't wait to say this shit. I found that funny. A lot of other people found that funny. You have rumors of collusion now coming about throughout the NFL. I don't know if I want to go that far to say it's collusion amongst the owners in the NFL. I will say this. Like I said, this is an intricate, delicate, and complicated matter. I don't think it's collusion. What I do think it is the owners are trying to reset the market. Because of what Cleveland did with Deshaun Watson, other teams are trying to make it known that we're not doing that. You might be a good quarterback. You might be a former MVP. You might have had success in the NFL, won a playoff game or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. You might be a good to great NFL quarterback, but we are not giving you that Deshaun Watson contract. That shit ain't happening here. Cleveland did that shit, but we're not doing that shit. That's what I feel like it is. I don't feel like it's collusion among NFL owners to not pay Lamar Jackson. I don't think it's honestly, I don't think it's race-driven either. A lot of people are making that assertion, that accusation that it's race-driven. The top 10 highest-paid quarterbacks in the NFL, half of them are black quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, and the aforementioned Deshaun Watson. So I don't think this is about race. I don't think this is race-driven. I don't think this is because Lamar Jackson's black and owners don't want to pay him his money. Just because he's black, as I just said, of the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks currently active in the NFL, 5 of them are black quarterbacks. So I don't think this is race driven. We as black people got to do a better job of picking and choosing our battles. If you want to say there's racism in the NFL, you could say that. I'll say that. I have no problem saying that. There is no black ownership in the NFL. And as I previously mentioned, A guy like Eric Bieniemy, who's proven himself 1,000 times over, he should be a head coach, not an assistant coach, for an absolutely terrible, putrid, pathetic, garbage, abysmal organization such as the Washington Commanders, who may or may not get sold within the next year. To me, that's a more appropriate example of racism in the NFL, the fact that a more than qualified guy is not a head coach, even though he's proven himself repeatedly over the years, even though inferior assistant coaches, including the two assistant coaches of the Philadelphia Eagles, Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, lost the Super Bowl. They lost the game, and they got head coaching jobs. Steichen in Indianapolis, Gannon with the Arizona Cardinals. They were a part of the team that lost the Super Bowl, and they got head coaching jobs. They got head coaching positions. Meanwhile, the guy who's been the offensive coordinator, the guy who was the offensive coordinator of the team that won the Super Bowl, he has to go somewhere and prove himself. Again, that's an example of NFL racism. What's going on with Lamar Jackson is not an example of NFL racism. The reason he has not gotten paid is because he turned down the contract that was offered. He was offered a 5-year deal, $250 million, $133 million guaranteed. He didn't take it. He also has his mother representing him as his agent. Not exactly the most wise, shrewd decision. I love my mother dearly, eternally. I love my mother. But never in a million years would I ever have my mother negotiate a contract for me. That would never happen. I would hire the appropriate and proper representation to make sure I get as much money as I'm looking for. Don't have family members negotiate contracts unless that family member is an actual agent. That doesn't make sense. That's going to hurt you in these contract negotiations. And right now, I think that's a part of the equation that's hurting Lamar Jackson, is having your mother represent you in these negotiations. So yes, I did find it odd and a bit peculiar how so many teams were in such a hurry to quickly state that we're not interested in Lamar Jackson, even though all those teams are quarterback deficient. Yes, I found that odd. And that's something worth looking into, but I don't think it was race-driven. I think it has more to do with the fact that he's asking for so much money for so many years, and you also got to cough up 2 first-round draft picks to bring him in. What I also didn't understand this week were so many people trying to compare the Daniel Jones contract and his situation to Lamar Jackson's, 2 totally different things. You can't conflate the two. So many people all during the week said, well, how the fuck does Daniel Jones get his money from the New York Giants? 4 years, $160 million, $82 million guaranteed. How does Daniel Jones get a contract like that, but Lamar Jackson can't get paid? I'm convinced on a daily basis people either don't read or don't have reading comprehension. They don't understand what they're reading. 2 totally different situations. Number one, 2 different organizations, 2 different teams, and also, most importantly, Daniel Jones was asking for $45 million per season. He didn't even get what he was asking for. He had to settle, quote unquote, for $40 million. He was asking for 45, he got 40. And the most important part of it all that everyone, for whatever reason, neglects and overlooks, he got $82 million guaranteed. Essentially, it's a 2-year contract. If Daniel Jones plays like shit the next 2 seasons for the New York Giants, they can just cut bait and move on. They don't have to honor or fulfill the remaining 2 years on that contract. So in all reality, it's only a 2-year deal worth $82 million, $41 million per season. Lamar, if Lamar had accepted that initial offer from Baltimore, he would have gotten $133 million. So the reason why Daniel Jones got paid and Lamar Jackson is still waiting is simply because Daniel Jones was asking for less. And he got less. He didn't get what he was asking for, but he was asking for a lot less than what Lamar Jackson is asking for. If Lamar was asking for Daniel Jones's contract, Baltimore would have already given it to him. If Lamar was asking for $45 million a year, he probably would have gotten it already. It's not about, is Daniel Jones a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson? No one in their right mind would say that. Daniel Jones is not a better NFL quarterback than Lamar Jackson. Daniel Jones had 1 good season last year under the tutelage of Brian Daboll. He threw 15 touchdown passes. However, in the interest of being honest, in the interest of being transparent. That's what we do over here at the Dion Gordon Podcast. That's what we pride ourselves on. The connoisseur of common sense, the purveyor of authenticity. If we're going to say that Lamar Jackson doesn't have enough weapons around him, then what the fuck are we going to say about Daniel Jones, who also has a deficiency of weapons around him? Who is Daniel Jones throwing the ball to? Darius Slayton. Shepard got hurt last year and really wasn't that impressive anyway before he got hurt. What weapons? Kenny Galladay had as many touchdown passes last season for the New York Giants as I did. 0. Kenny Galladay was an unmitigated disaster for the New York Giants. Other than Saquon Barkley out the backfield, who was Daniel Jones really surrounded by? Who was Daniel Jones throwing the football to last season? Without using Google, if someone put a gun to your head and said, name 2 New York Giants receivers in 2022, the average person would get killed. You would get your brains blown the fuck out if someone put a gun to your head on the spot without using Google, without looking at your phone and said, quick, in less than 10 seconds, tell me 2 wide receivers that played for the New York Giants in 2022, you would die on the spot. And you probably would die on the spot too if someone asked you the same question about the Baltimore Ravens. But I'm just saying, in the interest of transparency, in the interest of honesty, and having a legitimate conversation, if we're going to lament about the lack of weapons around Lamar Jackson, we also got to have the same exact conversation about Daniel Jones. He was surrounded by nothing last year. And also bringing it back to Lamar, if people are going to lament about the lack of weapons around him, if you pay him $50 million a season, you're not going to have enough money to go out and get weapons for him to throw the ball to. You can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you pay Lamar what he's asking for, under the salary cap, you're not going to have enough money to go out and bring in quality free agent wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins is available right now. The Cardinals are shopping him on the open market. If you're Baltimore, can you afford to bring in DeAndre Hopkins and also pay Lamar Jackson what he's asking for? No, you cannot do that. That is economically impossible. That is not a feasible, legitimate thing you can do. You cannot pay Lamar what he's asking for and also bring in DeAndre Hopkins or any other star quality free agent wide receiver. So you're going to have to go the route you've already been going, and that is draft wide receivers, unless you want to go the route you've gone before in the past if you're Baltimore and bring in an older receiver like Steve Smith Sr. or Anquan Bolden, guys in their 30s on the back 9 of their career. If you want to bring in someone like that, you can do it. You've already done that, though. Last season, Baltimore brought in Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson's washed. Deshaun Jackson is nowhere close to being what he used to be. In the year 2022, 2023, you are not getting the same Deshaun Jackson that you saw 5-10 years ago. Not that same guy anymore. So if you're the Baltimore Ravens, you're going to have to go the route you've already been going, draft, develop, and hope and pray that eventually you hit on one of these wide receivers you take in the draft seemingly every year. You got to hope that Rashad Bateman becomes something. Ultimately, my prediction in regards to what I think is going to happen with Lamar in Baltimore, I think he stays there. I think eventually there's going to be a resolution on that contract. Eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even next week, but at some point in time, there's going to be a resolution between Lamar Jackson and his camp and the Baltimore Ravens. And I think that initial offer of 5 years, $250 million, $133 million guaranteed is eventually going to be accepted because it's being shown right now on the open market. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of interest for Lamar Jackson at this point in time. Yesterday, a trade was made between Carolina and Chicago where the Panthers sent a boatload of draft picks as well as wide receiver DJ Moore to Chicago in exchange for that number 1 pick overall in the draft. Presumptively, you assume anyway, Carolina, who's also quarterback deficient, is going to use that number 1 pick in the draft to take a quarterback. So that takes Lamar Jackson off the table for the Carolina Panthers. Miami just picked up the 5th-year option on Tua Tagovailoa. So now that takes Miami off the table. But there's still a plethora of teams throughout the NFL that desperately need a quarterback. Something could happen. Washington could eventually pull the trigger. San Francisco, my favorite football team, could make something happen. It would be difficult because of the asking price of 2 first-round draft picks, and the 49ers this season don't have a first-round draft pick because of the Trey Lance trade in 2021. So if the Niners were to try to acquire the services of Lamar Jackson, that would mean the 49ers would have to give up and relinquish the next 2 first-round draft picks in 2024 and 2025. So the 49ers essentially would not have a first-round draft pick for about 4 years, counting 2022 and also this season and the next 2 seasons. But in exchange, if you can get Lamar Jackson, a generational talent such as him, it wouldn't even matter, really. And also, the Niners have 11 picks coming up in the upcoming draft, so not having a first-round pick, I don't think would be the worst thing in the world. It's like I said, like if San Francisco wants to make it happen, I wouldn't be upset about it. But I think ultimately he stays in Baltimore. I think he'll be a Baltimore Raven this season, and at least for the next 2 or 3 seasons. What's going to happen is he's going to have to swallow his pride and come to grips with reality and accept the fact that he's not going to get the contract he's looking for a multitude of reasons, but the biggest reason being that NFL owners are trying to reset the market and make it known to quarterbacks going forward, you are not getting $200 million plus guaranteed. That shit ain't happening. What I also think is that because Lamar has, quote unquote, been on the open market for the past couple of days and there's been such little interest, I think that could all drive down the price that he eventually gets. Baltimore is going to use that as leverage against him. They're going to say, well, we kind of sort of put you on the open market. And all these teams came out and said no. Immediately and emphatically, they said no. And so what value do you really have? They're going to use a lot of things against him, things I've already outlined. The production the past couple seasons, the inability to play every game the past couple seasons, only playing 1 game in the month of December the past 2 seasons, 1 playoff win under your belt. They're going to use all that, and now they can also use the fact that no other team showed interest in you. So your asking price is going to come down. You're certainly not going to get that $250 that you're asking for guaranteed. That is not going to happen. So I think, like I said, complicated, intricate, delicate situation. I love seeing black people get paid. But in this instance, Lamar, I don't think is going to get what he's asking for. I'm just trying to apply logic and reason and reality and rational thinking to the situation. I know those things are not quite in vogue nowadays. Everyone wants to be irrational and just make bombastic statements all the time, but I choose to go a different direction. Do I think Lamar is going to get what he's asking for? No. Should he get it? Also, probably no. But do I think he should get something close to that initial offer? Yes. And where do I think that's going to come from? The team he's already playing for, the Baltimore Ravens. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. I could be right. Whatever happens, I'm sure it'll be very entertaining. But when it's all said and done, when the dust settles, when the smoke clears, I think number 8 will be under center again for the purple and black, the Baltimore Ravens. So with all of that being said, this concludes this latest edition of the Dion Gordon Podcast. Eternally grateful, always humble, very much appreciative. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, at all times, never lose sight of this. Don't ever forget this sound advice. Lamar Jackson, if you're listening, first of all, thank you for listening to the Dion Gordon Podcast. Clearly, you are a man of great taste. But Lamar, if you're listening to me, I want you to listen to the 2 pieces of advice I'm going to give you. Number 1, fire your mother as your agent. Stop doing that. Do not let your mother negotiate contracts for you going forward. And that's number 1. And number 2, most importantly, make sure that you tread lightly like a woodpecker with a headache. Until next time, picture me rolling. I'm out.